You've seen fentanyl in headlines, but here's the part that gets ignored. A large share of the people dying in 2025 weren't even trying to use it. They thought they were taking cocaine, Xanax, or even Adderall. Fentanyl shows up everywhere because dealers cut it into counterfeit pills and stimulants. Tiny amounts imitate stronger drugs and stretch supply. Users end up playing biochemical roulette without knowing it. In this video, we'll break down why fentanyl tricks the brain so completely, how the economics behind it keep driving its spread, and why time and tools like Naloxone matter for survival. And when you look at the numbers behind this crisis today, the scale is hard to ignore. The new wave of the crisis. What has changed most sharply in recent years is not just the rising count of overdoses, but the way the crisis itself has shifted shape. This is the new wave of the epidemic, one where fentanyl no longer sits at the margins but has taken over the center. Today, the majority of opioid-involved overdose deaths are driven by illicitly manufactured synthetic opioids like fentanyl. Just a decade ago, heroin accounted for the bulk of fatal cases, along with prescription opioids such as oxycodone and hydrocodone. That balance has collapsed. Now fentanyl and its analogs dominate, cutting across every dataset, public health bulletin, and courtroom report. What was once a problem tied to specific drugs or regions has become a broad-spectrum threat, powered by a single synthetic compound that can end life with the most minuscule amount. What makes this phase especially disturbing is that the people dying often never intended to take fentanyl at all. A student assumes they're buying cocaine for a night out, a young worker thinks they got an anti-anxiety pill, or a festival goer believes a tablet is ecstasy. Each of these examples ends the same way: the drug isn't what it appears to be. The substitution is invisible, and the dose is unpredictable. This blurring of boundaries has severed the old logic that avoiding opioids meant safety. Fentanyl has redrawn every line by showing up in substances that once carried a far lower perceived risk. The shift has struck hard because it puts ordinary experimentation on a collision course with a compound strong enough to cause respiratory failure in seconds. Public health maps that once traced opioid misuse to a handful of concentrated regions no longer look the same. Instead of being confined to rural pill mill corridors or urban heroin markets, the tragedy now reaches into suburbs, campuses, and casual community spaces. Fentanyl spread through drug supplies so quickly that every demographic came to face the same vulnerability. A disturbingly large share of fatal overdoses today involve people with little or no opioid history. Some were experimenting for the first time or simply taking what they believed to be a legitimate pill from a friend. What makes fentanyl uniquely threatening is that it offers no runway. Its potency bypasses the gradual escalation more familiar with older opioids. There's often no tolerance built, no adjustment period, just a sudden collapse of breathing, unless someone nearby acts with naloxone almost instantly. Too often, that chain of events never happens in time. What makes the deception seamless is how authentic the counterfeits look. A fentanyl-laced pill can carry the same imprint as a pharmaceutical tablet. A powder may resemble cocaine with no visible clue. Even handlers often underestimate what they're distributing because concentrations are uneven. That's why two people can split what looks like the same pill, one walking away unharmed, the other dying within minutes. These hidden substitutions explain why fentanyl keeps appearing on death certificates in cases where the victim never knowingly chose an opioid. Despite visible harm reduction efforts, test strips at concerts, naloxone kits in public venues, the crisis continues to accelerate. The reason isn't simply that fentanyl is strong, it's that it hides in plain sight. Every contaminated line or capsule turns routine decisions into lethal risks. Psychologically, many still believe danger belongs to other users, but the substance keeps dismantling that assumption one case at a time. On the supply side, fentanyl's rise makes brutal sense. Unlike heroin or cocaine, which depend on crops, harvests, and long trafficking routes, fentanyl is a lab product. A kilogram can be diluted into millions of saleable doses, moving through supply chains with far less space and weight. That efficiency brings massive profits while minimizing enforcement exposure. Evidence of this spread is visible in law enforcement seizures. In 2023, officials intercepted more than 115 million fentanyl-laced pills nationwide. Such staggering numbers illustrate how thoroughly fentanyl has worked its way into the retail drug market. At this point, even calling it an opioid crisis risks understating the scope. Fentanyl has gone beyond the heroin landscape of the past to infiltrate cocaine, counterfeit prescription pills, and recreational party drugs. For users, the world of street drugs no longer looks like a field of separate choices. Lines between categories have blurred. Trusting that a powder or pill matches its surface identity has become a gamble stacked against survival. The cultural impact of this new wave is quieter but profound. Family warnings used to highlight issues like drunk driving or traditional hard drugs. Now, those conversations shift. A single pill passed around at a party or a casual experiment with something mislabeled could be fatal. Mental health clinicians recognize that counterfeit anxiety medications circulate as hazards. Law enforcement notes fentanyl appearing in unexpected packaging, even on products meant to imitate harmless edibles. The trickle of accidents reinforces that no one is shielded simply by avoiding opioids in name. Reports also show that people outside stereotypical drug spheres are dying after unintentional exposure. Microgram amounts can be lethal, so a trace on a surface or mixed into a counterfeit tablet alters the outcome dramatically. These hazards reshape perceptions because now casual users, or people who never considered themselves at risk of addiction, have become frequent entries in overdose statistics. The folk knowledge that once guided drug culture, judging batch strength, testing pills informally, trusting certain sources, has been erased. Fentanyl hides too well for anyone to spot with their senses. Doses are inconsistent because mixing is uneven, magnifying unpredictability. The same batch may hold both survivable and deadly amounts. This fuels the central fear of fentanyl. No one, not even those who sell it, fully understands what's inside a given sample. Statisticians describe fentanyl less as a new competitor in the market and more as a contaminant that remakes the definitions entirely. Cocaine seized today often contains opioids. Xanax purchased on the street rarely holds alprazolam alone. Even heroin now tends to arrive blended with fentanyl. Street drugs in 2025 cannot be assumed to be what their labels imply. The compound is saturated enough to function as the default ingredient rather than the exception. The conclusion of this phase is stark. What used to be drug culture segmented into categories, cocaine, pills, heroin, now collapses into one reality. Fentanyl governs them all. Substances picked up at a party, festival, or house gathering can no longer be trusted to be what they are claimed to be. That chemical substitution means fentanyl hasn't just amplified the crisis, it has rewritten what the street drug supply even is, replacing familiar choices with something fundamentally different. But fentanyl's reign isn't just about markets and supply lines. What makes it so uniquely disastrous is how it exploits the very systems inside the human body designed to guide survival. To see why its small amounts collapse breathing so swiftly and why the reward feels so irresistible, we need to look at how the brain itself receives the chemical signal. The brain's lock-in key. Picture the brain as a vast network of doors, each equipped with a unique lock. These locks are known as opioid receptors, and the most important of them for the effects of opioids is the mu-opioid receptor. Your body already makes its own keys for these locks. Those keys are endorphins, small chains of molecules released in precise, occasional bursts. They appear when you laugh, when you finish a run, or when you injure yourself and need to dull sharp pain. Their purpose is not to overwhelm you with euphoria, but to adjust your experience in balanced amounts. Stub your toe and endorphins provide just enough relief to let you keep moving. Push through a difficult workout and they give you that brief sensation people call a runner's high. In short, the system isn't about indulgence, it's about calibration. Too much pain would immobilize us. Too much pleasure and drive would evaporate. Endorphins help right a middle path, with receptors serving as the regulators that keep signals proportionate. Of course, biology is not perfect safeguard design. Receptors don't act like conscious gatekeepers. Under chronic drug exposure, their signaling can change, rewiring whole circuits with consequences that nature never intended. On the microscopic scale, the process is elegant. Mu-opioid receptors sit on neurons that help regulate both reward perception and pain signaling. When inactive, those neurons freely pass on messages of distress, injury, or stress. When receptors bind endorphins, the electrical activity on the neuron shifts, reducing the message's intensity and releasing a sense of relief. What makes the system efficient is that endorphins act only where they are needed. A jab to the elbow quiets only that local pain, rather than numbing the entire body. This is the artistry of a system tuned by evolution. Receptors and endorphins align in a way that produces just enough correction to keep you functioning. We'll simplify the deeper molecular detail, but the central idea is this: the body produces opioids carefully and locally, And the receptors, they act upon moderate survival, critical sensations like pain and reward. This balance is where synthetic opioids create disruption. Fentanyl is not a product of plants like morphine derived from the opium poppy. It is lab-made, designed with a potency that evolution never prepared the brain to handle. Once fentanyl enters the blood and reaches the brain, it doesn't nudge receptors quietly. It overruns them in a concentrated assault. Imagine every lock in the house being forced open simultaneously. To the receptor, there is no difference between the key forged by nature and the chemical key built in a laboratory. The difference is in intensity. Endorphins are whispers. Fentanyl is a shout. The receptor system itself didn't evolve to anticipate synthetic molecules of this design. Its role was to help humans survive environments full of injury, fatigue, and danger. Pain signaled damage. Endorphins offered relief only when necessary to keep you moving. Fentanyl manipulates that system, forcing the receptors to broadcast signals of relief even while real threats remain. It's as though a car's dashboard warning lights were disconnected in the middle of a crash. Relief is announced, but the danger never stopped. The system has been tricked into generating false safety reports, crippling the feedback mechanisms that balance survival. A major reason for the vulnerability lies in fentanyl structure. This molecule is small, slippery, and able to bind mu opioid receptors with remarkable strength. It attaches more firmly than morphine, faster than heroin, and produces effects that far exceed what naturally occurring opioids could ever reach. If heroin is like a crowbar prying at a door, fentanyl is closer to a battering ram smashing through the frame. Because of this high affinity, even microgram amounts can hijack the system in seconds. A human could release endorphins for a lifetime and never equal the magnitude of force fentanyl exerts in a single dose. For perspective, the bursts of endorphins from laughter, affection, or exercise measure in nanograms, quantities so small that laboratories need specialized tools to detect them. These brief releases are enough to dull pain or lift mood in fleeting ways. In contrast, a speck of fentanyl visible on a fingertip may contain a concentration capable of activating millions of receptors all at once. That overwhelming binding explains why particles as light as dust can halt breathing. Fentanyl doesn't just unlock the receptor system, it bullies the entire structure until basic signals collapse. The effect is not confined to pain and pleasure in the moment. Opioid receptors are embedded in broader networks that handle memory and learning, including the mesolimbic reward pathway. In this circuit, neurons from the ventral tegmental area project into the nucleus accumbens, teaching the brain which experiences are worth repeating. Normally, a workout might feel rewarding, and your brain encodes that memory to motivate you to run again. An injury teaches avoidance. Fentanyl short-circuits both lessons. It floods the reward system so powerfully that the experience is imprinted as a pinnacle sensation that must be pursued, even though it carries lethal risk. The lock is tampered with, yet the brain records it as a signal to repeat. Another layer of this system explains why dependence is so punishing. Over time, the receptors stop responding normally. With each episode of fentanyl stimulation, the brain adjusts, dampening its own sensitivity to restore balance. This is the biological basis of tolerance. The more locks are battered open, the less intact the structure becomes. Eventually, ordinary endorphins, those tiny surges that once lifted mood or encouraged resilience, barely register at all. The system has recalibrated to expect a constant flood. It takes larger and larger doses to produce the same high, while normal experience starts to feel hollow. The same adaptation also feeds into withdrawal. One key site is the locus ceruleus, a region that releases the neurotransmitter noradrenaline. Under opioids, this region is suppressed. With repeated use, the neurons compensate by increasing their excitability. Remove the drug suddenly, and the locus ceruleus fires without restraint, releasing excess noradrenaline throughout the body. That surge creates the familiar symptoms: agitation, sweating, shaking, nausea, and overwhelming anxiety. This is why opioid withdrawal feels so severe. The same system that was calmed under the drug rebounds with violent intensity once the chemical support is gone. All of this shows why fentanyl is more than just another chemical stimulant. It isn't simply about chasing the euphoric sensation. It is about the disruption of a system that was honed for balance, converting a finely regulated mechanism into one dominated by brute force. Endorphins act like precise instruments, carefully adjusting mood and pain to guide decisions. Fentanyl acts like a blunt weapon, smashing every receptor without subtlety, changing circuit responses and reshaping behavior itself. It's also important to stress how passive the receptors are. They cannot distinguish between natural and synthetic. They don't possess defenses to block an intruder molecule. Whatever fits is accepted. And fentanyl, because of its chemical design, fits almost perfectly, sticking tightly and refusing to let go. This leaves the body in a lopsided struggle. Nature designed locks to respond to fleeting signals, while human engineering created a key that clings and overwhelms. On one side, a delicate biology. On the other, a molecule optimized for binding power. Unlike natural endorphins, which degrade within minutes, fentanyl lingers. While endorphins appear and vanish quickly, restoring balance, fentanyl sustains its activation long enough to keep receptors overstimulated. The body begins to lose grip on basic vital functions, breathing slows, alertness fades, and the perception of comfort continues unnaturally. This persistence is part of why fentanyl is so dangerous. By holding the system wide open, it breaks the rhythm necessary for survival and pushes machinery designed for fluctuations into destructive overdrive. This is the core of how fentanyl manipulates brain function. It may be described as tricking the system, but more accurately, it's brute force impersonation. The receptors evolve to respond with moderation, yet fentanyl hijacks the process until breathing, perception, and decision-making are compromised. Each natural balance point is inverted. Pain no longer teaches caution. Pleasure no longer reflects success. What kept humans oriented toward survival is replaced by imitation signals that do not align with reality. Endorphins create moments of clarity, a release after laughter, a sense of reward after perseverance, or the calm that follows stress. They are evidence of a system that normally works with precision. When fentanyl enters, it targets the very same receptors, but uses them against the body that built them. What should be survival signaling becomes vulnerability. The locks that once ensured balance become weaknesses that computer-engineered molecules can exploit. Understanding this opens another question. If the receptor system itself explains how opioids produce pleasure and dependence, what is it about fentanyl as a specific molecule that makes it so much deadlier than morphine or heroin, the drugs it has replaced? The answer begins with how quickly this compound enters the brain, how strongly it binds once there, and how little of it is required to overpower the body's most critical functions. Why fentanyl hits differently. Why fentanyl stands apart from its opioid relatives comes down to more than potency. It's about the unique way it operates inside the body and brain. Morphine and heroin are already infamous for their ability to relieve pain and create euphoria. Yet fentanyl is positioned differently. Research estimates it can be multiple tens of times more potent than heroin, often cited in the 20-50 times range, which explains why minuscule amounts cause outsized effects. The factor that makes fentanyl lethal is not a better high, but how its chemistry changes nearly every dimension of exposure: entry speed, receptor binding, potency, and risk of sudden shutdown. Morphine serves as the older standard. When injected or swallowed, it circulates in the blood and eventually reaches the brain, producing pain relief and sedation in a gradual wave. Heroin, created from morphine, alters this process by being more fat-soluble. That property helps it cross the blood-brain barrier faster, leading to the notorious immediate rush. The blood-brain barrier itself functions like a checkpoint, limiting chemical access to protect sensitive tissue. Morphine gets through only after delay. Heroin moves faster, but fentanyl bypasses restrictions with even greater efficiency. Its extreme lipid solubility allows it to pass into the brain with almost no resistance. If you picture morphine cautiously walking through security line by line and heroin slipping through with a quicker pass, fentanyl looks like someone with special credentials who skips the process entirely. Within seconds of ingestion or inhalation, fentanyl is already at full receptor activation, leaving almost no gap between use and collapse. This explains why overdoses unfold so abruptly. Heroin sometimes provides a short period of warning, slow movements, heavy eyelids before breathing danger sets in. Fentanyl strips that window almost completely, often shifting someone from alert to unconscious within moments. Once fentanyl arrives inside the brain, its behavior changes the risk even. Further, opioid receptors accommodate natural endorphins with short, subtle interactions. Morphine copies that mechanism but detaches after a time. heroin binds longer. Fentanyl, though, attaches with unusually high affinity. It clings more firmly like glue and activates the receptor with full force. That saturation overwhelms the system because there is no opportunity for signals to taper or retreat. Even a trace amount continues pressing down heavily on receptor networks that control pleasure and pain. Potency magnifies this danger. In medical context, morphine doses are measured in milligrams, small but tangible units still visible to the human eye. Heroin also operates at low milligram doses when injected recreationally. Fentanyl's effective dose, however, measures in micrograms, that is thousands of a milligram. To the naked eye, the usable dose looks closer to dust than powder. This isn't abstract math. It means that the difference between relief and death is measured in amounts smaller than a few grains of table salt. A dosing error for morphine might bring nausea or excessive sedation. A dosing error for fentanyl can mean instant fatality. This narrow threshold is described pharmacologically as a very small therapeutic index, the ratio between a helpful dose and a lethal one. Morphine offers slightly more leeway. Heroin holds some middle ground, at least with experienced users. Fentanyl, by contrast, makes the margin almost non-existent. The body cannot differentiate between a dose meant to relieve pain and one that suppresses breathing until it is too late. This is why unintentional use leads to so many fatalities. When individuals think they are using cocaine, MDMA, or counterfeit pills, there is no buffer for survival estimates or slow realization. Another defining factor is the style of onset. Morphine produces steady sedation. Heroin delivers a sharper but still structured sequence: rush, euphoria, drowsiness. Fentanyl interrupts that pattern almost entirely. It floods receptors, unleashes dopamine in reward circuits, and simultaneously depresses the brainstem structures that govern unconscious breathing. Instead of drifting, consciousness can snap off in minutes. Emergency studies note that hypoxia, the loss of oxygen to the brain, can show measurable effects within 60 seconds of fentanyl's respiratory suppression, harming neural tissue almost immediately. This shortens the window for intervention significantly compared with heroin overdoses. This difference in speed alters how overdoses present to others. With heroin, bystanders might notice signs: slurred speech, gradual nodding, shallow, queasy movement. With fentanyl, the collapse may come with little warning: a sudden fall, bluish coloration of the lips, chest rising unevenly or not at all. The steepness of the dose-response curve leaves almost no intermediary signs between intoxication and life-threatening suppression. It mimics a switch turning off, where companions hardly have time to realize what happened before the person on the ground is already deprived of oxygen. Complicating things is fentanyl's tendency to disperse unevenly when diluted into counterfeit drugs. Because it requires such small storable volume, pressing or mixing it rarely leads to uniform distribution. One pill might contain an unnoticeable fraction of a microgram. The next in the same batch could be loaded well past lethal levels. This inconsistency amplifies risk for casual users who believe a prior sample indicates safety. Each trial spin has radically different odds built in, making survival one attempt and respiratory shutdown the next. From a user's perspective, fentanyl also creates an unpleasant paradox. Many reports suggest the euphoric high is actually briefer and harsher than heroin's. Heroin intoxication can last several hours, maintaining sedation and withdrawal protection. Fentanyl brings an intense but short-lived high, followed quickly by a sharp return to negative symptoms, including craving and withdrawal onset. This provokes rapid redosing behavior, as individuals chase relief not for pleasure, but to stave off discomfort. The cycle drives repeated exposures that compound overdose risk within a short time frame. If morphine and heroin resemble long building waves, fentanyl looks more like a violent collapse. It doesn't integrate into the body's rhythm, but imposes disruption as a sudden shock. This metaphor explains why so few users perceive unfolding danger. The drug saturates within moments, leaves swiftly, but imprints a blunt crash that drives compulsive reuse.